I don't date black women. It's a preference. Aaron Curry said it without flinching. He didn't whisper. He didn't hesitate. He said it like it was fact, like the color of someone's skin disqualified them from being loved or seen. Angela Monroe hadn't planned to stop near the private dining room. She had only come to drop off her resume. Curry and Flame was the most talked about kitchen in Chicago. It had just earned another Michelin star. People waited months to taste what came off Aaron Curry's plates. But what she heard made her pause, still gripping the folder. He wasn't shouting, just talking loud enough for the table of investors to hear. She recognized his voice from interviews, from podcasts, from her culinary school textbook. His face was on the wall outside. His name was on the glass door. And now, that same voice had knocked the air out of her chest. Angela didn't step into the room. She didn't say a word. She slowly walked to the front desk and handed over her resume like nothing happened. But her fingers trembled just a little as she turned to leave. Outside, the rain had started again. Her heels clicked down the sidewalk, steady, even. But her heart? That part felt heavy. Angela had just come off a 10-hour shift at a family-owned soul food spot on the south side. She was tired, but determined. The resume in her folder was freshly printed, corners crisp, her name bold at the top. She'd spent 3 days rewriting it, 3 hours walking to get here, 3 years dreaming about this moment. Curry and Flame. The name alone carried weight. The building was modern, but quiet. Black steel accents, gold signage, valet out front. She didn't belong here, not yet, but she wanted to. She had talent, vision, and a point to prove. As she walked through the foyer, the scent hit her first. Smoked herbs, lemon zest, butter on seared scallops. Angela's pulse picked up. The hostess gave her a short nod, took the folder with a tight smile, and turned to walk it toward the back. Angela waited by the glass divider, just outside the private dining section. That's when she heard it. Aaron's voice. Clear, confident, unchecked. I don't date black women. It's a preference. Angela blinked, almost thinking she heard wrong. But the silence that followed confirmed it. A deep pause, then soft chuckles. No one in the room corrected him. No one disagreed. Angela took a small step back. Not because she was afraid. She was trying not to drop everything in her hands. Angela didn't cry. She didn't storm in and throw the resume back in his face. She just stood there for a beat, long enough to feel the sting settle in her chest and the weight of the moment press into her ribs. She wasn't shocked by the words. She'd heard versions of them before. What cut deep was who said them. Aaron Curry, the chef she once studied on late nights between shifts. The man who talked about balance, flavor, discipline. Who posted quotes about humility on social media. She had once defended him during arguments about cultural appropriation. She believed he had taste, integrity. Turns out he had neither. Angela steadied her breath, straightened her spine, and turned away. She walked to the exit like her heels didn't ache and her throat wasn't tight. She didn't look back at the dining room. She didn't wait to see if anyone noticed her standing there. She had heard enough. Outside, the rain tapped against her shoulders like it wanted to remind her. This wasn't the end of her story. The street was quiet. Her pride was louder. Angela pulled her coat tighter and kept walking. She had delivered her resume. She had heard the truth. Now she was done with both. 2 years can build an empire if you don't waste pain. Angela Monroe didn't. She poured every late-night insult and every backhanded compliment into her food. She took over a dying cafe on the West Loop and rebuilt it from scratch. She renamed it Monroe's Table. No PR push. No family money. Just grit, vision, and food that told the truth. Now, reservations were booked out 3 months in advance. And tonight, she wasn't just attending the Rising Chefs of Color Gala, she was the keynote. The ballroom buzzed with camera flashes, music, and voices bouncing off chandeliers. Top chefs, editors, critics, all in one place. Angela walked in wearing a black satin dress that fit like it was made for her body alone. Her shoulders bare, her skin glowing under soft gold lights, and her hair pulled into a perfect high knot. She didn't wear flashy jewelry. She didn't need to. She walked like a woman who knew she belonged here. Whispers followed her path. Some knew her story. Some only knew the results. But all eyes turned when her name was announced over the mic. Angela Monroe, Chef of the Year. The room stood. Applause filled the space. She smiled. Slightly, gracefully, Because this moment wasn't about proving anything. It was about arrival. Angela didn't rush to the stage. She moved slowly, confidently, letting the room adjust to her presence, letting them take her in. She wasn't loud. She didn't need to be. Her name had already done the work. Every chef who once brushed her off, every critic who called her too ambitious, every executive who suggested she tone it down stood watching now, clapping because they had no choice. She passed a row of culinary directors from top restaurants in Chicago. One of them stood half a beat late, someone she'd interned under 5 years ago. He didn't meet her eyes. Good. At the front of the ballroom, the stage lights painted her gold. She accepted the crystal plaque without tears, without dramatic speeches. She thanked her mother, her staff, and the people who never expected her to make it. Especially them. Her voice was clear, measured. She didn't mention anyone by name. She didn't need to. Every person who had ever told her no was now watching her say yes to herself, and mean it. Back at her table, the seat beside her remained empty. She didn't bring a date. This night was for her. Her work, her wins, her name. Angela Monroe was no longer a resume in someone's hands. She was the standard. Aaron Curry stood across the room, drink in hand, stiff as granite. He hadn't planned to attend the gala. His assistant practically forced him to show face. His latest restaurant, Eros, was weeks from launch. His mind had been buried in flavor tests, soft openings, and endless investor meetings. But now, none of that mattered. Because she was here, Angela Monroe. The moment her name was called, something in him clenched. At first, he didn't recognize her. He saw a woman in black, elegant, commanding, unforgettable, but not familiar. Not yet. Then the name echoed over the speakers, and the memory came flooding back. The resume, the voice in the dining room, the silence that followed. Aaron felt the glass shift in his grip. Tight, too tight. His jaw locked. His eyes stayed glued to her as she walked toward the stage. He had tasted thousands of dishes, shaken hands with senators and celebrities. But no moment had ever punched the air out of his lungs like this. She was here, in his orbit again. But she didn't see him. She didn't even look in his direction. And that, somehow, hurt more. Backstage after the ceremony, chefs mingled near the catering stations, shaking hands and exchanging compliments. Angela stood by a tray of hors d'oeuvres, chatting politely with an event sponsor, still holding her plaque in one hand. Aaron waited. He didn't cut through the crowd. He didn't force an introduction. He waited until she turned, just slightly, enough for their eyes to meet. Her expression didn't change, but her silence said everything. He stepped forward slowly. "Angela," he said, voice quieter now, less sure. "Your work is exceptional." She didn't smile, didn't soften. "I know who you are," she said flatly. His throat bobbed. "I remember everything you said," she added. The sponsor beside her looked confused, glancing between them. Angela ignored it. Aaron opened his mouth, searching for a word that might matter. None came. She tilted her head slightly, then walked away. No raised voice, no dramatic exit. She just turned her back on him, gracefully, deliberately, and walked off. Aaron stood still, hand halfway raised, stuck in a memory that hadn't aged well. All the success in the world couldn't fix what he broke that night. And the worst part? He knew it. Aaron didn't leave the gala early, but he didn't stay long either. After she walked away, he stood alone for what felt like hours, though it was probably minutes. People passed him. Some nodded. None stayed. His ego should have softened the blow, but it didn't. He had dismissed a woman who would later redefine the city's culinary scene. He'd reduced her to a preference before ever tasting what she could create, before ever seeing her. And now she was untouchable. The kind of woman people cleared rooms for. The kind of woman people paused conversations to watch. And he was just a man standing in the corner, replaying the exact moment he failed her. Angela never looked back that night. She posed for photos, laughed with friends, took a slow sip of champagne like the world had finally adjusted to her pace. Aaron watched all of it from the shadows, not with bitterness, but with regret. Deep, clean, earned, and for the first time in his career he had no recipe to fix it. Have you ever stood face to face with someone who once dismissed you and watched them choke on their silence? Have you ever outgrown the very room that tried to keep you small? Angela didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence did what arguments couldn't. Now it's your turn. Type your moment below. Comment if you've ever had someone try to limit you and lived long enough to see them regret it, like this story if it reminded you to never shrink for approval. Subscribe for more true-to-life stories where power shifts and strength speaks without yelling. Because some moments aren't about revenge. They're about being undeniable. Monday morning started like any other, sunlight through her studio kitchen window. The hum of her fridge, a stack of invoices she didn't feel like opening. Angela was in the middle of preparing a jerk glaze reduction for a private tasting when she heard a knock at the door. Not loud, just 2 measured taps. She wiped her hands on a clean towel and opened the door to find a sharply dressed woman holding a white envelope. "Delivery for Miss Monroe," the woman said. No courier bag, no branded van, no clipboard. Angela raised an eyebrow but took the envelope. The woman turned and left without another word. The envelope was thick, heavier than normal. Her name was written in bold serif font. No return address. She opened it slowly, her hands already sensing it wasn't fan mail or a routine invite. Inside was a personalized letter on fine cream stationery. The heading read, Eros, a culinary experience curated by Chef Aaron Curry. Angela's fingers froze mid-fold. The letter was typed, but the signature at the bottom was real, inked in black. His name spelled out fully, Aaron Curry. He was inviting her to co-develop the full menu for his upcoming rooftop restaurant. Concept, romantic pairings, limited seats, seasonal ingredients. A soft opening in 6 months. All expenses covered. Creative control guaranteed. The pay? Generous wasn't the word. It was almost offensive how much money he was offering. Angela sat down on the nearest stool, letters spread out in front of her like it was written in another language. Her mind went still for a full minute. Then the memory came back, the sound of his voice 2 years ago. The words, the disregard, her walking out into the rain, heart tight but head high. And now, this? She looked at the signature again. It was definitely his. No apology note attached. No explanation, just an offer, big, bold, and clean. Angela stood, walked to the sink, and stared at the letter one more time under the light. Chef Aaron Curry was many things, arrogant, skilled, influential. But he wasn't stupid. This wasn't random. He knew who she was. He remembered. The letter proved it. The part that confused her most wasn't the money or the offer. It was the silence. No words about the past. Just an open door. Angela folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope, setting it aside on her shelf, next to unopened wine bottles and unused awards. She'd seen bold moves before, but this one made her hands shake. Angela didn't touch the envelope for 3 days. She saw it every morning, sitting there on the corner of her kitchen shelf, unbothered, white, quiet, taunting. She kept telling herself she was too busy to deal with it. Her cafe was preparing for a celebrity brunch. A local food critic was rumored to be stopping by, unannounced. Staff scheduling was a mess. Vendors were late. Her pastry chef had called out sick. But none of that explained why she kept staring at the damn envelope when no one was looking. By day 4, it sat beside her laptop as she reviewed her business's numbers. The money Aaron was offering could fund a second location. It could clear her kitchen loans. She could finally pay her mother's medical bills in full without rearranging half her life. And it wasn't just the pay. He was offering full creative control. Her menu, her hands, her voice. In one of the most anticipated restaurant launches in the city. It should have been a yes without hesitation, but it wasn't, because Angela remembered everything. She remembered that night, the cold tone of his voice, the look on the hostess's face as she tried to smile through it. She remembered how her resume felt heavier in her hands after she overheard him. She remembered how it rained, not just outside, but inside her chest. And now he wanted her to build a menu with him, after declaring women like her weren't worthy of attention outside of a kitchen. Angela closed her laptop and pushed her chair back. She wasn't naive. In her field, you had to work twice as hard to get half the recognition. She had done that already, without him. She had her own name now, her own brand. So what did working with Aaron Curry do for her? Did she need this? Or was this his way of rewriting a mistake without saying it out loud? Angela walked over to the envelope again. She picked it up this time, felt the weight. Read the words again. This wasn't just a job offer. It was a test, A test of pride, of forgiveness, of control. If she said no, it would be justified. She didn't owe him grace. If she said yes, it couldn't be because of the money. It had to be on her terms. Angela stared out her window, watching traffic build down the block. Her fingers tapped against the envelope's edge. Chef Aaron Curry wanted to cook with her. Then he'd have to cook in the heat she walked through every day. And she'd make sure he felt every degree. But she still didn't call. Not yet. Because she wasn't finished thinking about how much she was worth, and whether he was even allowed to stand next to it. The seventh day came like the others. Quiet morning, email backlog, and kitchen noise starting to bubble by 9 a.m. Angela hadn't touched the envelope since the last time she read it. She didn't need to. Every word had burned itself into her memory. She could recite the exact phrases, the offer, the location, the timeline, the absurd paycheck. She hadn't told anyone. Not her sous chef, not her best friend, not even her mother. This decision was hers to make. Not because she didn't trust them, but because she needed to sit with the silence and see what her own mind said when no one else was talking. And what it said was simple. This wasn't about Chef Aaron Curry. It was about her. Angela poured herself a glass of cold hibiscus tea and stood by the window, phone in hand. She'd saved the assistant's number from the back of the letter. It had been staring at her from her recent call log for days, untouched. She stared at the number again, then hit call. It rang twice. Curry and Flame office. A crisp voice answered. "This is Angela Monroe. Tell Aaron I'll be there Monday morning at 10, she said. Silence on the line for half a beat. Then yes, Ms. Monroe, we'll have everything arranged. Angela ended the call before the woman could say more. She didn't need to explain herself. This wasn't some dramatic career leap. It wasn't her falling for the bait of attention or status. She was accepting a professional opportunity. That's all. She walked back into her kitchen and wrote out a list of menu ideas that might work with a rooftop setting. Light dishes, bold flavors, seasonal textures. She wasn't going there to prove anything to Aaron. She was going to do what she had always done, build from the ground up. Angela spent the rest of the day prepping for her cafe's Sunday dinner. Special. But her mind kept circling back to that rooftop kitchen. Not because she was nervous, because she was already planning, already visualizing workstations, flavor combinations, pacing. By nightfall, she had 6 dishes on paper that might fit the Eros concept. She told herself this had nothing to do with him. She told herself this was just business. She told herself if he said anything slick, she'd pack her knives and walk. But part of her knew, deep down, that this wasn't going to be easy. There would be tension. There would be history. There would be moments that pulled at things she thought she buried. Still, Monday at 10? She'd be there. Not for him. For the kitchen. For the work. And for the reminder that her talent had always been louder than his opinion. Angela arrived at 9:56 a.m., 4 minutes early, just enough to show professionalism without looking eager. The elevator took her straight to the 17th floor. Private access, no music, clean steel doors. When it opened, she stepped into a glass-enclosed rooftop space that smelled like stone, herbs, and money. Tall windows framed the Chicago skyline. White marble counters stretched the length of the open kitchen. The air was cool but dry, humming with quiet potential. She heard pans being unwrapped, knives clinking on metal trays, and distant voices discussing ingredients. The space was gorgeous, expensive without trying too hard. But she didn't come to admire the scenery. She came to work. Angela stepped forward, chef coat pressed, hair pinned back, knife roll gripped in her left hand. A woman greeted her at the far counter, a tall assistant with sharp bangs and tablet in hand. "Chef Monroe, welcome. Chef Curry's in the back prepping the tasting suite. He'll be out shortly." Angela nodded once. The assistant led her to a personal locker. It already had a label, Monroe. She tucked her coat inside, unrolled her knives, and laid them out like she always did, from paring to cleaver. Order mattered, especially today. At 10:07, Aaron Curry walked in. White button-down rolled at the sleeves. Clean apron tied flat. No jewelry. No entourage. Just him. His eyes found her quickly. They didn't greet each other. No handshake. No nod. Angela looked at him once. Brief, cool. Then turned back to her tools. Aaron walked to the far counter without saying a word. Tension settled in the room like an extra weight in the air. Not loud, just present. Angela took her station without being told. She knew the layout already. Had studied the plans for Eros during the week of silence. This was her kitchen now, too, and she wasn't asking for permission to belong in it. By 10:15, she was slicing shallots. By 10:25, she was sautéing fennel over low heat, testing pan temperatures by instinct. Aaron worked across from her, focused, wordless. They moved around each other like weather fronts, close enough to feel the shift, far enough to avoid contact. He didn't speak. She didn't offer small talk. But the team noticed. Assistants stole glances. One of the pastry interns nearly dropped a whisk trying to keep track of their silence. Angela didn't flinch. She wasn't here to give them a show. She was here to build a menu that deserved attention on its own. But she felt him watching her, every step, every motion, every decision she made. She didn't stop, didn't flinch, didn't slow down. Because if this was going to work, she needed to make one thing clear from day one. She wasn't a guest. She was the reason they'd remember this kitchen. And if Aaron had any pride left, he'd stay out of her way. The second day began at 7 a.m., sharp. Angela arrived early again. The kitchen was quiet, still dark at the edges. She liked it this way, before the chatter, before the clatter of pans, before the city fully woke up. She unpacked a fresh basket of ingredients she'd sourced herself. Blood oranges, rainbow carrots, Thai basil, lamb shoulder. All seasonal, all intentional. She wasn't here to impress. She was here to teach that her food didn't beg for approval. It earned it through flavor and precision. Aaron came in around 7:30, still silent, still focused. They didn't speak, but something had shifted. That morning, instead of working at opposite ends, they took prep stations beside each other. Close, but not too close. Angela started with a slow-roasted carrot puree. She charred the skins before peeling them, locking in a smoky layer that brought out their sweetness. She didn't measure. She tasted, adjusted, trusted her hands. Aaron watched from the corner of his eye, never interrupting, just following the rhythm of her movements. When he plated his first tasting item, a seared duck breast with ginger fig glaze, he slid it near her without a word. She picked up a tasting spoon, took a bite, chewed slowly, then nodded. Good balance. But the glaze dies halfway through the chew. Try a squeeze of lime. Maybe a whisper of toasted clove. He didn't argue. He walked back to his station and rewrote the ratio. Later that afternoon, she asked him to taste her lamb shoulder, braised, in tamarind broth, topped with shaved mint and crispy shallots. He took one bite and stilled. Then, "That's not a dish, that's a decision." Angela didn't smile, but inside, something settled. They cooked like that for hours, handing off spoons, critiquing without ego, adjusting without debate. Every move they made, every note they gave, had a purpose. No wasted ingredients, no wasted time. Their styles were different, his more polished, hers more rooted. But together, it created something that neither of them expected. Even the kitchen crew noticed. One of the prep assistants whispered, "It's like they're having a full conversation without speaking." And maybe they were. By the third day, they had 5 test dishes. By the end of the week, they had a rough menu board, divided by flavor pairings and textures. Angela didn't say thank you. Aaron didn't offer compliments. But when she cleaned her knives that night, she realized she hadn't looked at the clock once during the day. The tension was still there, thick, complicated, unspoken, but it no longer felt like a wall. It felt like the edge of something changing. They still didn't talk about the past, but their work was speaking for them. And it was loud. Aaron had seen talent before. He'd mentored young chefs who went on to open restaurants in Miami, San Francisco, even Paris. He'd trained staff that got poached by luxury hotels and private clubs. But none of them worked like Angela Monroe. She didn't just create food. She listened to it. By the end of their second week, Aaron stopped pretending he wasn't watching her. The way she moved, sharp, clean, deliberate. Her knife cuts were consistent, her timing flawless. She could make a soup taste like a memory, or turn 3 ingredients into something you'd never forget. But it wasn't her technical skill that shook him. It was her restraint. Angela didn't show off. She didn't try to outdo him. She didn't fish for approval. She showed up, executed, and left on her own terms. That quiet confidence, it haunted him. Late one night after everyone else had cleared out, Aaron stayed behind to clean his station. Angela had already gone. Her towel was folded. Her knives were gone. but her scent lingered, a mix of citrus oil and vanilla from the pastry glaze she'd tested earlier. He stood there, replaying her voice from the first day she returned. "I remember everything you said." He'd tried to convince himself that moment had passed, that he could move forward without looking back. But now, he couldn't. Every time she nailed a sauce pairing or corrected a seasoning he'd missed, it wasn't just humbling, it was a reminder of what he almost dismissed, a reminder that he judged before knowing, a reminder that she could have been building his empire 2 years ago if he hadn't let his own bias speak louder than his taste. One afternoon, they both reached for the spice rack at the same time. Their hands brushed. She didn't pause, but Aaron did. He looked down at her hand, strong, steady, focused, and remembered the version of himself who once didn't believe she deserved to stand beside him. He hated that version. He hated how comfortable he had been saying those words, how easily he excused it as preference when it was something much smaller and uglier. Regret didn't come all at once. It came in waves, when she laughed with the pastry team, when she solved a balance issue in the lemon vinaigrette with just a hint of miso, when he noticed she always tasted twice before approving a dish, never once. Aaron knew there was no quick fix, no apology that could undo the sting of the past. But he also knew this: he wasn't watching a good chef. He was witnessing someone better than him in ways he'd never admit out loud. And it made him want to be different, not for show, but because working next to her made anything less feel dishonest. Angela didn't come to flirt. She didn't come to forgive. And she definitely didn't come to heal anyone's guilt. From the moment she stepped into the rooftop kitchen, her boundaries were sharp and visible. She clocked in. She cooked. She cleaned her station with precision. She kept conversations short and only about the food. When the pastry chef tried to tease her about how Aaron always stood closer to her station than anyone else's, Angela didn't flinch. "Maybe he just wants to learn something," she said flatly. She wore command like a uniform. Aaron noticed it immediately. He had expected tension, maybe even pushback or passive aggression, but what Angela gave him was colder than either. She gave him professionalism. She gave him silence where others might have asked for closure. She gave him clean handoffs, fast feedback, and zero personal conversation. At first, it frustrated him. Then it fascinated him. Every time he tried to inch towards small talk, "How's your mom doing?" Or, "What do you think about that pop-up in Hyde Park?" She responded with clipped, efficient answers. "Fine, busy, tight margins." Then she'd pivot right back to the menu. Angela wasn't playing hard to get. She wasn't playing at all. She was working. And the more Aaron watched her in that element, utterly focused, emotionally distant, the more he felt the distance he created years ago slamming back into him. She never once brought up what he said that night. She didn't act wounded. She didn't act angry. She acted indifferent. And somehow, that stung worse than outrage, because it meant she had already made peace with who he was, without him. She didn't need his approval. She was building her name before he reached out, and she would continue after this collaboration ended. That's what made her powerful. Aaron kept his distance, but not out of arrogance, out of respect. He knew better now than to mistake her poise for weakness. Still, late at night, after the test kitchen had gone quiet, he sometimes found himself staring at the spots where she'd stood hours earlier. The way she tied her apron, the notes she scribbled in her black moleskin, the way she wiped her hands on her hips when deep in thought. These details started piling up, not romantic, not sentimental, just real. Angela had no idea the effect she was having on him, and if she did, she didn't care. Because every time he looked at her like he wanted to say something more, she met his eyes for 1 second longer than necessary, and said nothing. He respected that. She was in control now, not emotionally, not strategically. Fully. And the man who once dismissed her was learning, quietly, what it meant to finally shut up and pay attention. It was a Tuesday night, just past 9 p.m. when the moment happened. The staff had cleared out early. Aaron stayed behind to rework a garnish on one of the main courses. Angela lingered too, adjusting a reduction that had felt too sour on the tongue earlier that day. The test kitchen was quiet. Jazz played low on the overhead speakers. One of the interns had cued it before leaving. Outside the glass walls, the Chicago skyline pulsed in soft lights. Rain tapped against the window, faint and steady. Angela stood at the burner, stirring the sauce gently, She reached for the tiny spoon tray beside her, but knocked it off balance. Reflex kicked in. She reached to catch it. Aaron did too. Their hands met over the tray, his palm closing over hers before either could stop. The contact was brief. Bare skin, calloused from years of chopping and flame, touched her fingers. His hand was warm. Hers didn't pull away immediately. Angela froze for half a second, not because of the touch, but because of what didn't follow. She didn't feel anger. She didn't feel heat. She felt still. Aaron let go first, stepping back, unsure whether to speak. Angela looked down at her hand, then casually wiped it on a cloth beside her. "You don't need to catch things for me," she said without emotion. "I know," he replied, voice low. "Habit." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't empty either. It was layered. They returned to their stations. Aaron plated his dish in silence. Angela finished reducing the sauce until it glossed the spoon just right. But the air had changed, not in a loud way, in the way tension shifts when it's no longer cold, but not yet warm. Later, as they cleaned up, Aaron reached over her shoulder to grab a container of saffron. He was too close. She could smell the hint of citrus soap on his wrist, the faint trace of wine he'd sipped earlier with his risotto test. She didn't move. He hesitated behind her, then stepped back without saying a word. She turned her head just slightly and looked at him, expression unreadable. Aaron didn't speak. Angela didn't smile. She simply went back to wiping her counter. But something unspoken had passed between them. Not affection, not forgiveness. A crack, a shift, the tiniest disruption in her carefully held control, and in his long-held regret. By the time she packed her knives and walked out, Aaron was still standing near the fridge, pretending to reorganize labels. When the elevator dinged closed behind her, he finally exhaled. Because for a brief second in that kitchen, they weren't just chef and co-chef. They were something else, something harder to name, and neither of them knew if it was a mistake or the start of something they couldn't unfeel. 3 weeks passed. Angela and Aaron worked side by side almost every day. Still no personal conversations. Still no mention of that first touch. Still no acknowledgement of what was quietly building between them. But it was there. It lived in the silence between tasks, in how he handed her tools before she asked for them, in how she prepped extra portions of the glaze she knew he'd use again, in how neither of them asked the other to stay late, but always did. Their rhythm was mechanical, but not cold. They began to move around each other with ease, like two dancers who knew the floor but refused to make eye contact. Angela noticed that Aaron stopped correcting junior chefs in front of her. She noticed that he stopped triple-checking her reductions, like he used to during week 1. Now, he'd simply taste them and nod. He had stopped overseeing her. She had claimed her space, and he had quietly surrendered. Their rhythm was unspoken but clear. She led sauces, he led proteins. She composed the vegetable courses, he adjusted the wine pairings. They filled in gaps without talking. They edited each other's decisions without insult. Neither ever said good job. They didn't need to. The work was the proof. Sometimes they passed each other in the kitchen, and their hands brushed again, not by accident, not quite intentional either, just close enough to remember. Angela kept her voice measured. She gave Aaron no window for personal comments. Every question he asked, she answered with precision. Every moment she could have turned soft, she stayed sharp. But even she couldn't deny the strange comfort that had settled between them. They didn't smile at each other, but they also didn't leave early anymore. Some nights, they stayed past midnight. No deadline to meet, no manager. Waiting, just a slow rhythm of creative flow that didn't feel forced. The team began calling them the quiet fire, because the heat between them wasn't loud, but it was constant. Angela noticed that Aaron no longer checked his phone during prep. Aaron noticed she'd started using some of his plating techniques, subtle, refined. Neither commented on it, but they both noticed. And still, the silence lingered. But this time, it wasn't about avoidance. It was anticipation. Every glance, every reach, every still moment between their movements became its own language. They weren't talking about the past. They weren't talking about anything at all. But somehow, their silence said more than most people's words ever could. The kitchen always felt different after hours. Without the crew, without the noise, without the hum of machinery in full swing, the space became quieter, warmer, personal. Angela noticed it first during a Tuesday night session. She had stayed behind to test a chili oil pairing with a slow poached cod dish. She didn't tell anyone she'd be staying late. She didn't expect company. But Aaron showed up anyway. No announcement. No explanation. He walked in around 9:40 p.m., sleeves rolled, apron already, tied, holding a half-empty notebook and a fresh bunch of lemongrass. Angela didn't greet him. She didn't need to. They worked in parallel silence for the next hour, moving with smooth familiarity, saying nothing. But the air had shifted. When she leaned over the prep table to reach for her tasting spoon, she felt his eyes. On her back, not in a way that made her shrink, but in a way that made her pulse skip. She tasted her cod. It needed acid. She reached for a slice of pickled lemon, eyes still on the pan. He spoke without looking up. Try pomelo instead. It'll stretch the citrus without punching the base. Angela raised an eyebrow, but tried it anyway. It worked. She didn't say thank you. He didn't expect her to. The hours passed. Steam rose from the stovetop, fogging the windows. The lights above them dimmed slightly on a timer, softening the room. Angela plated her test dish, setting the cod on a shallow bowl with the pomelo chili oil and a thin ribbon of basil foam. Aaron stepped beside her and leaned in to taste, close enough for her to feel the warmth from his arm. He dipped his spoon, took a bite, and paused. Then he looked at her, eyes steady, quiet. Angela met his gaze for a beat too long. Her throat tightened, not because she didn't know what he was thinking, but because she did. Neither of them smiled, but neither of them looked away. For the rest of the night they moved slower. The glances became more frequent. The touches, accidental or not, lingered just long enough to register. Angela pulled her curls into a tighter knot, her neck warm. Aaron poured them each a glass of sparkling water, placing hers on the edge of her station. No words exchanged. She took it without looking, sipped, and returned to her prep. When midnight struck, neither of them moved to leave. Angela worked on her third sauce reduction. Aaron tested new garnishes. Their hands passed within inches. Their silence deepened. There was something there now, heavy, real, still restrained, but simmering. The kitchen, once loud and clinical, had become something else entirely. They weren't rushing. They weren't confessing. They were waiting. For what? Neither said, but both of them felt it. The shift, the pull, and the storm that was quietly forming beneath every glance. By the end of week 4, the silence between them had a shape. It wrapped around every shift, every tasting, every time they reached for the same ladle or corrected the balance of a dish. No one else in the kitchen noticed. Not really. To the staff, they were just two talented chefs working side by side. To the interns, maybe even intimidating. But Angela knew better. She could feel the heat of his body before he stepped behind her. She could hear the slight hitch in his breath when she got too close. His posture changed when she walked in. His voice dropped when he asked for things. He was holding something back. So she tested him. One Friday evening, most of the team had left early for a staff dinner. Angela stayed behind to finalize a sweet and spice glaze she'd been developing for the new duck course. Aaron lingered as well, fine-tuning a roasted plum reduction. It wasn't unusual anymore, this quiet parallel working. Angela set her plate down on the counter, then crossed behind Aaron to grab a clean whisk from the hanging rack. She could have gone around. She didn't. Instead, she passed behind him deliberately, so close her chest brushed his back lightly, just enough for it to register. He froze, only for a second. She didn't say a word. She reached for the whisk, stepped back into her space, and kept stirring her glaze like nothing happened. But her hand trembled slightly as she tasted the sauce again. She knew what she was doing, and so did he. Aaron kept his eyes on his station, not turning once. But his shoulders were tense now, and his knife work a little slower. Angela moved around the counter, now back in his field of vision. She took her time plating the duck, adding the glaze in slow, even strokes, letting her wrist lead with grace. She could feel his gaze this time. He didn't blink. She looked up briefly, met his eyes, and held it. Then she said, "You're staring." "I'm watching," he replied, voice even. "There's a difference?" He said nothing. The silence stretched, sharp, loaded. Angela wiped her hands, placed the plate under the heat lamp, and turned away. She didn't wait for him to follow. Aaron exhaled through his nose and rolled his sleeves higher, returning to his reduction. Whatever had just passed between them wasn't small, but he wasn't going to cross that line. Not yet. Not until she made it clear it wasn't a test. Angela didn't push again that night, but she felt it in her chest when she got home. The weight of his pause, the restraint, and how, for the first time in years, she wanted someone to fail that test, just a little. The rain came fast that night. Thick drops smacked against the rooftop glass like an impatient knock, and within minutes the city blurred behind foggy windows. The kitchen lights dimmed on their programmed timer. The crew had already gone. Only Angela and Aaron remained, caught in another late prep session that had drifted into silence and overtime. Angela had just pulled a batch of caramelized leeks from the oven. The aroma filled the air, sweet, earthy, precise. She moved slowly that evening. Not tired, just heavy with thought. The kitchen had become too familiar, too full of unsaid things. She was used to tension, to hard conversations, to uncomfortable truths. But this was different. This was quiet wanting, and it was harder to ignore with every day that passed. She stood still for a moment, spoon in hand, eyes on the storm outside. The windows shivered as thunder cracked somewhere far above the skyline. Aaron was across the room, reviewing handwritten notes on texture pairings. He glanced up when he felt her pause. Angela didn't look at him. She placed the spoon down, untied her apron, and walked toward the balcony door. He watched her hand press against the glass, then slide it open with a slow pull. The wind rushed in instantly, cold and wet. Rain splattered the tile by the entrance. Angela stepped out into it. Bare arms. No umbrella. No hesitation. She walked to the edge of the balcony, both palms resting on the steel railing, her eyes focused on nothing and everything at once. The rain soaked through her black tank top in seconds. Her curls fell from their tie, pressed down by the water. She didn't flinch. Aaron stood frozen inside, towel still in hand, watching her silhouette blur against the glass. He stepped closer, but didn't cross the threshold. "You'll catch a cold," he said, through the open door. Angela turned her head slowly, rain trailing down her cheek like it belonged there. Her voice came low but clear. "Then come inside." She paused. "Or kiss me and shut up." Silence. She didn't smirk. She didn't blink. Aaron didn't move for a long second. The storm carried on behind her, wind curling around her frame, her clothes clinging to every curve. She held his gaze, unwavering. And still, he didn't speak, because nothing he could say would match the weight of her challenge. Angela turned away first, back to the city lights, rain washing over her skin like it had been waiting for her return. She didn't step back inside. She didn't beg. She simply stood there, drenched, still, powerful, and left the door open behind her. The choice wasn't his to make. It was his to answer. The wind pushed harder now, sweeping rain across the rooftop tiles like a warning. The storm wasn't letting up, and neither was she. Angela didn't move from the edge of the balcony. Her words still lingered in the air behind her. "Then come inside, or kiss me and shut up." Aaron stood in the doorway, chest rising slowly, hands clenched at his sides. Water sprayed against his shirt from the gusts slicing through the open frame. The rational part of him screamed to retreat, close the door, clean his station, act like nothing had been said. But the way she looked in that rain, solid, centered, glistening, shut down every excuse he could think of. This wasn't a trap. This wasn't a test. It was a line, and he had to choose which side he stood on. He stepped forward, one foot, then the other, until both shoes hit wet concrete and the rain kissed. His skin like it was punishing him for every hesitation he'd ever made. Angela didn't turn to face him. She waited. The drops poured down his sleeves, soaked through his collar. His hair flattened. The rooftop lights flickered behind them, casting a dim reflection on the soaked windows. He reached her without a word. Only when he was close enough to feel the heat from her skin did she turn slightly. Just her. Head, her eyes locking onto his with that same fierce calm she'd always worn like armor. Aaron stood in front of her now, inches away, water dripping from his jawline, eyes never leaving hers. "You sure?" he asked, voice low. Angela didn't answer with words. She reached up and touched his face, just one palm against his cheek, thumb grazing his skin as if brushing away the last of his silence. That was her answer. No games, no fear, just want, real, quiet, unapologetic. And then he kissed her. The first contact was slow, cautious, as if both were still unsure whether they deserved it. But that hesitation didn't last. Angela's hand slid behind his neck, pulling him in deeper, tighter. His hands found her waist, soaked fabric beneath his grip, body warm beneath the chill of rain. Their mouths moved like they had been waiting for this moment since the first glance, since the first silence. He pressed her against the railing, water dripping from their bodies, mixing with breath and heat. She kissed him back with purpose, not softness. Her lips didn't tremble. Her grip didn't loosen. She was showing him who she was now. And if he wasn't ready for that, he could step back inside and never try again. But he didn't. He stayed in the storm, hands in her hair, lips on her neck, her breath catching as his mouth traveled lower. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. The only sound now was thunder behind them. And the crack of restraint breaking apart at last. The kiss deepened fast. Aaron's hands pressed firmly against Angela's waist, fingers sliding up. Her soaked blouse, feeling the heat of her skin beneath the cold fabric. Rain poured over them, but neither pulled. Away. Her curls, now loose and dripping, clung to her face as she kissed him. Harder, slower, like she had something to say and didn't need words. Her mouth opened for him, without hesitation, not because she'd forgotten what he said 2 years ago, but because in that moment she wanted him to know she was choosing this, not as a reward, not as a favor, but on her own terms. Aaron felt it. Her grip, her pressure, her clarity. He tasted it in her mouth, sweet, sharp, unyielding. She pushed her hips forward, and his breath caught. He responded by lifting her off her feet with one swift motion, carrying her back into the kitchen without breaking the kiss. Her legs wrapped around his waist naturally, tightly. She was soaked through. So was he. Every step he took felt heavier, like the air had thickened around them, like this wasn't something they could undo after it started. He set her gently on the stainless steel prep counter. Her back arched. Her chest met his. Her fingers dug into the back of his shirt as he kissed her again. Neck, jaw, collarbone. Angela's eyes fluttered open just long enough to watch his face in the dim kitchen light, focused, wanting, reverent. She reached between them and tugged his apron free, letting it fall to the floor. He exhaled through clenched teeth as her palms slid beneath his shirt, tracing the hard lines of his abdomen. Her hands weren't shy. She'd studied his work. Now she was studying his body. Aaron kissed down the curve of her neck, then lower. His lips found the edge of her bra, damp and clinging to her skin. She shivered, not from the cold, but from the contact. He paused. "Say stop," he whispered into her skin. She leaned her head back, throat exposed. "I'll say it when I mean it," she breathed. That was all he needed. He slid her blouse over her shoulders. She let it fall. Her chest rose with each breath as he kissed her again, deeper this time. His hands roamed, learning her, worshipping without rushing. Angela's legs pulled him closer. She wasn't passive. She met him with equal fire, pulling, pressing, teasing. Her mouth found his ear, her teeth grazing his skin. He groaned low in his throat, burying his face against her shoulder, gripping her tighter. Every movement from her was deliberate. Every moan earned. They didn't say anything more. The kitchen, once clean and cold, had become something entirely different. The counter was warm beneath her. The storm still raged outside, and for once, inside her chest, it felt still. Still, and finally open. His breath was uneven now. Angela could feel it against her collarbone, warm and ragged. His hands had slowed, no longer rushed or greedy, but reverent, like he was catching up to the weight of the moment. Like he realized that this wasn't lust playing tricks on them. This was real, and dangerous. She leaned her forehead against his, and closed her eyes for a second, still. Straddling his waist, her fingers splayed against the back of his neck. Aaron had stopped kissing her, but not moving. His hands traced slow lines up her thighs, settling at her hips. He held her like a man afraid to break the truth that had finally shown itself. Angela didn't speak at first. She just let him stay there, still, breathing, touching her with care, not urgency. Then, softly, her voice barely a whisper over the hum of the kitchen refrigerator, she said it again. "I'll say stop when I mean it." Her tone wasn't breathless or teasing. It was calm, assured, final. And that's when his forehead pressed deeper into hers, and his arms pulled her even closer. Not to take, but to listen. Aaron didn't ask for more. He didn't test her limits. He didn't push her toward a next step. He simply nodded against her, letting that line sit between them like a promise neither of them would betray. Angela held his gaze, then cupped his jaw with one hand. "Don't rush this," she said quietly. "I'm not," he replied. "I've waited too long to mess this up." Rain still pattered outside the glass walls. The room smelled like roasted herbs, citrus, and something sweeter, something new. Aaron helped her down from the counter slowly, hands never leaving her waist. She adjusted her blouse without shame, retying the knot at her side. He picked his apron off the floor, but didn't put it back on. Neither of them spoke as they moved through the cleanup. Angela wiped down the counter while Aaron returned ingredients to their shelves. Their silence was no longer heavy. It was understood. He passed her a towel for her hair without a word. She took it with a small nod. When they reached the elevator, she hit the button first. He didn't offer to ride down with her. She didn't invite him. The doors opened. She stepped in. Before it closed, Aaron called out softly, "See you tomorrow?" Angela didn't turn around, but she answered, "Yes." Then the doors shut. Down she went, dripping, tired, flushed, but clear. She didn't replay the night in her mind. She didn't second guess. She didn't float on fantasy. She simply walked out of the lobby into the empty street, rain now light and scattered. Her heels tapped the sidewalk with the same confidence she had 2 years ago, only this time her heart wasn't heavy. It was warm. And maybe, just maybe, it was ready. The next morning, nothing was said. Not about the kiss, not about the rain, not about the way he held her like she was the only thing anchoring him to earth. Angela walked into the rooftop kitchen at 9:58 a.m. as usual. Her coat was neatly folded, her apron tied tight. Her lips were bare. Her eyes were sharper than ever. Aaron was already there, prepping a citrus glaze in silence, back turned to the door. When she passed behind him, there was no hesitation, no pause, no good morning, just the faint echo of two people pretending nothing had happened. And still, everything had changed. The silence between them now carried weight. It wasn't awkward. It was charged, like a spark waiting on its next breath of air. Their hands no longer brushed. Their movements were too precise for accidents now. She stayed 3 feet away at all times. He never stepped behind her unannounced. They didn't avoid each other, but they avoided acknowledgement. Angela took over the dessert course that week. She introduced a hibiscus meringue paired with smoked sea salt ganache. It was a bold combination, the kind of thing critics either called genius or absurd. Aaron didn't say anything as she plated the test batch. He just tasted, set the spoon down, and walked away. No praise, no critique. But later that evening, she noticed him rewriting the entire wine pairing around the floral notes. That was enough. Sometimes he lingered behind her just long enough to be felt. Sometimes she left a spoon where he could reach it first. But neither crossed the line again. Not yet. Instead, they buried themselves in the work. Final plating sessions, ingredient orders, coordinating press tastings. The restaurant was only a few weeks away from its soft launch. Every day, their names were spoken together in meetings. Angela and Aaron. Aaron and Angela. The CO leads. The creative minds. But no one in the kitchen knew what had happened that night in the rain. Angela liked it that way. She wasn't here to start something she couldn't define. And she wasn't going to hand over her heart just because a man kissed her like she was air after drowning. She'd been kissed before. She'd been wanted before. But she had never been seen fully, until that night. Still, that didn't mean she trusted it. Desire was easy. Commitment was currency, and she wasn't about to sell herself short. So, they worked, professionally, efficiently, and every unspoken thing that passed between them was carefully folded into the silence. They didn't touch. They didn't talk about it. But under every dish they created, under every glance they shared, it was there, waiting, still warm, still unfinished. Angela never kept track down to the day. She'd always been regular, never missed a cycle, never had to mark calendars or set reminders. But somewhere between test kitchen deadlines, flavor pairings, and avoiding eye contact with Aaron Curry, something slipped. 3 days late, then 5. She told herself it was stress, launch pressure, lack of sleep, the weather, anything but the obvious. But when she woke up that Friday morning with a strange mix of nausea and tenderness, she knew. She didn't panic. She didn't cry. She showered slowly, dressed with precision, and walked to the corner pharmacy 2 blocks from her apartment. She paid in cash, kept her head down, and refused the receipt. Back home, she waited in the bathroom. 3 minutes. 2 pink lines. Clear, bold, immediate. Angela stood staring at the test in silence for a long time. Her stomach didn't drop. Her knees didn't buckle. She simply breathed and whispered, "Okay." That afternoon, she showed up to the kitchen late. First time ever. Her staff noticed. The pastry intern asked if she was okay. "Fine," she said quickly. "Got caught in traffic." Aaron looked up from a sauce reduction. He didn't say anything, but his brow furrowed for half a second. She tied her apron tighter than usual, pressed her lips together, and got to work. Every movement was sharp, focused, efficient, but she was sweating by the time she hit the 3rd course. Her breaths came shorter, and the smell of anchovy paste from across the kitchen made her stomach turn. Angela stepped outside for air. Aaron followed 2 minutes later. He found her leaning against the wall just past the service hallway, one hand bracing her stomach, the other gripping the railing. "You're pale," he said. "I'm fine. You're not." She turned her head, eyes locked on his. "I didn't ask you." He didn't respond, just stood there, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning her face. She steadied herself, straightened up, wiped her palms on her apron. "You don't look at me like I'm weak," she warned. "I don't," he said. Another pause. Then she walked past him, back into the kitchen. She couldn't avoid it for much longer. She knew that. But today wasn't the day for questions. Today was for steady hands, clean plating, and a calm face. Only her chest knew the truth, how fast her heart was pounding. Only her mind was screaming the same word over and over. Pregnant, pregnant, pregnant. And somewhere beneath that, layered like a second heartbeat, a quieter question took shape. What now? Angela didn't plan it. There was no dramatic setup, no long-winded speech, no warning. It was the following Monday. Cold, quiet. The kitchen was calm, humming with pre-dawn focus. Staff prepped stations, soft conversations passed between line cooks, and deliveries rolled in like clockwork. She had the test folded inside her jacket pocket. Not the stick, just the result page from the clinic she went to over the weekend. She didn't trust home tests alone, not when her body had never betrayed a routine like this before. The doctor had spoken clearly. No mistake. You're 8 weeks. Angela had nodded once. No questions. No crying. She simply folded the paper and left. And now it was in her hand, lightly trembling, as she walked into the test kitchen where Aaron was arranging garnishes for the tasting board. He didn't look up right away. "Morning," he said absently. She didn't respond, just walked straight up to him, stopped 2 feet away, and held out the paper. Aaron finally looked up, mid-reach for a sprig of thyme. His eyes moved from her face to the folded sheet between her fingers. "What's this?" he asked. "Read it," she replied. No emotion in her tone, no shake in her voice. Aaron set the garnish aside, wiped his hands on a towel, and slowly took the paper. He unfolded it. It took him 3 seconds to read, maybe 4. But what followed was a silence that stretched so thick it wrapped around the kitchen, swallowing every other sound. His chest rose once, then again. Angela didn't speak. She waited, letting him sit in it, letting him feel the weight she had been carrying for days. His hand stayed at his side, gripping the paper tighter than he realized. Then he looked at her, eyes wide, steady, honest. She didn't flinch. He swallowed hard, throat tight, face unreadable. "Yours?" he asked, not because he doubted, but because the words felt too big to accept without confirmation. Angela nodded once. He didn't ask for proof, didn't question timelines, didn't run. He just stood there, blinking once, and whispered, "Okay." Angela narrowed her eyes slightly. "That's it?" He shook his head slowly. "No, it's just, I didn't think I'd ever get this close to something I didn't want to ruin." The paper dropped to the counter between them. Angela's eyes didn't soften. She stayed composed. "I'm not looking for a savior," she said, "or a fixer, or a man who thinks he can make this feel like less than what it is. I know," he said. He stepped closer. She didn't move. His hand hovered, like he wanted to touch her stomach, then thought better of it. "You don't have to decide anything now," she said flatly. I already did, he replied. Aaron didn't hesitate. He didn't look away. He didn't ask for time. He didn't scramble for words that might soften the moment or stretch it into something distant and abstract. He took one deep breath, then said it, clear and quiet. I want this. Her, you, all of it. Angela didn't blink. Her heart pounded, but her face stayed neutral. She'd seen men make bold claims before, seen them promise the moon with trembling hands and break under real weight. Words didn't impress her. Stability did. Consistency did. Aaron stepped closer, not touching her, not assuming anything. You don't have to figure this out alone. She folded her arms. You're not responsible for me. I know, he said, but I'm still showing up. Angela studied him. She wasn't looking for poetry. She was looking for signs, any sign that he understood what this would mean. Not just pregnancy, but parenthood, visibility, accountability. You sure you want to stand beside me? She asked, tone low, because the minute this becomes public, I become the story. And you become the man who once said, I remember, he cut in. His voice didn't rise, but it didn't waver. I remember what I said. I live with it. But don't confuse what I said then with what I feel now. That was ignorance. This is clarity. Angela tilted her head slightly, watching him. You're talking like this is a campaign. I'm talking like this is real, he replied. And I won't let silence write the next chapter. The kitchen staff kept working in the distance. No one noticed the exchange, just two chefs standing close, saying everything without needing to yell. Aaron took another step. Now there was barely space between them. If this baby is ours, he said, then they deserve a version of me I've never been before. Someone who doesn't hide behind fear or shame. Angela's arms slowly dropped to her sides. She hadn't expected him to fold, but she hadn't expected this either. Still, she wasn't convinced. Words are easy, she said. You're good with timing and performance. You always have been. His jaw tightened. Then, watch me. Angela's gaze didn't drop. She didn't smile. But something in her chest moved, shifted slightly, because he wasn't performing this time. He was steady, measured. There was no desperate scramble to win her approval. Just presence. And presence, when offered without condition, mattered more than any apology ever could. She stepped back, picking up the paper he had dropped on the counter. You still have a business to run, she said quietly. I do, and I still have decisions to make. I know. She looked at him one last time before walking to the pantry door. And though she didn't say it out loud, a piece of her, small, cautious, still guarded, believed him, at least for today. Aaron might have been ready, but Angela wasn't. The days that followed were quiet, but not in the way they had been before. The silence no longer held tension. It held boundaries. Angela returned to her usual routine, but there was a slight shift in her steps. She moved slower. Her morning started earlier. She drank more water. She smelled everything twice before tasting. Her body was changing, and she felt every small detail. Tightness in her lower back, nausea in the early hours, a dull ache in her chest by late afternoon. She didn't tell anyone. Not the team. Not the pastry intern who kept calling her Chef A with too much enthusiasm. Not the front desk staff who noticed she had been eating smaller meals. And definitely not Aaron. They worked in sync, just like before, but now he kept his distance in a way that felt intentional. Not cold, respectful. He didn't try to pry. He didn't follow her into side rooms. He didn't press, but he stayed late every night. He brought extra fruit to the cooler. He switched the espresso machine to decaf without being asked. Angela noticed. She noticed everything, and that's what made her pause. Because good gestures didn't erase bad patterns. And wanting to be present didn't mean he was ready to handle what came with showing up every single day. One night, after the kitchen had cleared out, Angela stood at the far end of the prep station, quietly reviewing next week's menu board. Aaron approached her slowly, holding a dish towel in one hand, eyes hesitant but steady. You feel okay? He asked. She didn't turn. Define okay. His voice softened, balanced, supported. Angela wiped her palms on her apron. Physically, I'm managing, she said. Emotionally, she finally turned, locking eyes with him. I haven't decided if I want you yet. Aaron didn't flinch. He nodded once, like he'd been waiting for that exact sentence. "Okay," he replied. "That's fair." She studied him. "You want this child," she said. "You've made that clear. But wanting me, that's not something you get to shortcut." "I'm not asking to," he said. "Then don't act like your presence is the proof," she warned. "I don't fall for men who show up at the first ultrasound and disappear by the first diaper." "I'm not leaving." "You left me 2 years ago," she said quietly. "You just didn't know it." That silence hit different. Aaron's hand tightened around the towel. "You have every right to question me," he said. "But I'm not here to be the hero. I'm here to be responsible. And if more than that ever happens, it'll be because you chose it, not because I earned it with a speech." Angela nodded. That was the answer she needed. Not a vow, not a performance, just acknowledgement, the kind that came without pressure. They didn't announce it. There was no staff meeting, no official memo, no curated press release. Angela had no intention of turning her pregnancy into a headline, and Aaron respected that. But secrets don't stay still, not in a kitchen this tight, not when the stakes are this high, and especially not when your name has been trending on food blogs for weeks. It started with a whisper. Someone on the morning crew noticed Angela stepping away to the bathroom more often than usual. Then it was the way she suddenly swapped her lunch order. Less spice, more starch. A line cook spotted her taking 2 ginger chews from her pocket before plating the 3rd course. By the time she quietly declined wine at a team tasting, the theories had already started. She's probably just tired. Maybe she's fasting. I heard she's sick. I heard it's his. One morning, Angela walked in to find 2 pastry interns whispering too loudly near the fridge. They fell silent the second she entered the room. She didn't bother addressing it. She didn't have to. The air had shifted. Again. That afternoon, the online food blog Chicago Palate published a blind item. 2 of the city's top chefs, known for their sharp dishes and sharper tension, maybe cooking more than just risotto behind the scenes. Aaron forwarded it to her inbox with no message, just the link. Angela didn't respond. She didn't need to. She'd spent years carving her name into an industry that didn't always know where to place her. Being whispered about wasn't new, but now those whispers came with assumptions about her body, her choices, her worth, and it burned. In the kitchen, glances started lingering longer. People paused when she entered a room. Some smiled too politely. Others looked uncomfortable. Angela stayed poised. She led with clarity, corrected mistakes with precision, didn't raise her voice, didn't explain herself. Her stomach had just started to round, barely noticeable under her apron, but enough for those who were paying attention. By Thursday, Aaron noticed the shift in the room too. He caught a junior chef staring at Angela's midsection during prep. The kid didn't even try to hide it. Aaron didn't yell. He didn't make a scene. He simply walked over, leaned in, and said, "Focus on your work, not your theories." The kid turned red and nodded quickly. Later that evening, Angela approached Aaron while he was wrapping duck confit. "They're talking." "I know. And they're blaming me." He paused. "Do you want me to say something?" "No," she said firmly. "I want you to keep doing what you're doing. Quiet, consistent, present." He nodded. Because that was the only thing he had to offer that wasn't wrapped in guilt. Angela exhaled slowly. "Let them talk," she added. "I've been carrying more than gossip my whole life." He watched her walk away, belly barely showing, spine still straight. And for the first time that day, he smiled. She didn't need defending. She was already leading. It happened after a long day, one of those days where nothing went right. Deliveries were late. The new sommelier questioned their pairing list. A social media post from the Eros account accidentally leaked a partial menu draft, sparking critique before the launch even hit the press. Everyone was tense. Angela was exhausted. She didn't let it show, but by the time dinner service wrapped and the last prep notes were filed, her body had slowed. Aaron noticed her move differently. The way she shifted her weight from one foot to the other, the pause she took before bending down, the brief wince when she reached too high for the spice rack. He didn't call it out. He didn't hover. He just waited. When the kitchen cleared and the night crew turned off the overheads, Angela stayed behind to wipe down her station. The faint hum of refrigeration units buzzed low in the background. The city lights flickered behind the glass. Aaron approached, slowly, a clean towel in hand. She didn't look up when she spoke. You still hovering? He stopped just a few feet away. I don't hover. I observe. Angela chuckled lightly. Observing sounds a lot like hovering with a diploma. He took that in. Then his eyes dropped, just slightly, toward her midsection. She was in a soft charcoal apron, tied just below her ribs now, instead of at the waist. The bump was subtle but unmistakable. She turned, caught him looking, but didn't cover herself. Don't make it weird, she said softly. I'm not. She tilted her head. You're thinking too hard. Not thinking at all, he replied. Just standing here. Then, without speaking further, he stepped forward and knelt down. Angela stiffened at first, but then she didn't move. Aaron stayed low, head level with her belly, hands resting on his own thighs. His eyes lifted to meet hers. I know you're still figuring me out, he said, voice low. I know you haven't decided if I'm temporary or just tolerable. But this? He looked down again, then placed one hand gently, cautiously, against the curve of her stomach. This is the only thing that feels real right now. Angela swallowed, arms crossing loosely over her chest. He wasn't doing it for a show. There was no audience here, no spotlight. Just two people in a quiet kitchen, late at night, standing in the middle of a life they didn't plan, but couldn't ignore. Aaron let his hand rest there a few more seconds, then removed it. He didn't kiss her stomach. He didn't say a word about the future. He just rose to his feet slowly, eyes never leaving hers. I'm not going anywhere, he said. Angela didn't respond, but she didn't walk away either. Her silence said enough. She believed him, for tonight, and for now, that was enough. Angela didn't speak for a long time. She just stood there, watching him. Aaron stood still too, hands at his sides, face open, eyes waiting. There was no noise in the kitchen now. The fridges hummed quietly in the back. Outside, the wind nudged against the glass. The fluorescent lights above the line flickered once, then held steady. Angela's body was tired. Her back ached. Her chest felt heavy. But her heart? Her heart was doing something she hadn't let it do in a long time. Soften. She stepped forward slowly until they were standing toe to toe. Aaron didn't move, didn't reach, didn't assume. He just looked at her like he had no idea what she'd do next, but would be okay with any version of it. Angela reached up first, one hand, gentle but firm, resting on his chest. Then the other, she looked into his eyes. They weren't pleading. They weren't proud. They were present, and that was what she needed more than anything. She didn't warn him. She didn't ask. She just leaned in and kissed him. Soft at first, steady, intentional. Aaron responded immediately, but not greedily. His hands found her back, resting just beneath her shoulder blades. He kissed her like he remembered everything, every silent shift, every shared glance, every restrained moment in that kitchen since the beginning. Her lips parted, and he deepened the kiss, but gently, like he didn't want to take, like he only wanted to be where she was willing to meet him. Angela let herself melt into it, not because she needed saving, but because she was tired of holding it all alone. She broke the kiss first, just slightly, forehead resting against his. Her breath was shallow. His was too. They didn't speak. She didn't need to ask if he meant it. He didn't need to ask what it meant to her. Their bodies had filled in what words could never hold. Aaron's hand stayed on her back. Angela's fingers tugged lightly at the front of his shirt. She whispered something, barely audible. Don't ruin this. He didn't promise not to, but he said, I won't walk away. She nodded once and pressed her lips to his again, slower this time. It was a kiss of agreement, of permission, of something beginning, not restarting. When they finally separated, they didn't look rushed. They didn't look confused. They looked like two people standing in the middle of a quiet truth. A shared truth. Angela adjusted her apron, took one deep breath and said, I'm still hungry. Aaron smiled. I've got leftovers. She raised an eyebrow. From who? He turned toward the fridge and said over his shoulder, the only woman who's ever cooked me into silence. She smirked as he reached for the foil-wrapped lamb from earlier in the day. And in that small, still moment, in a kitchen built for brilliance, they chose peace. Together. Some stories don't need loud endings. They don't wrap in perfect bows. They don't hand you clear answers. They leave you standing in a kitchen, barefoot in your own thoughts, wondering, How something that began in silence grew into something that's steady. Angela didn't forgive Aaron in one night. She didn't erase the past or pretend those words never happened. But she saw the difference between a man who spoke carelessly and a man who was now choosing to speak only when it mattered. He wasn't trying to fix her. He was trying to show up. And sometimes that's where change begins. Not in the grand gestures, but in the consistency, in the pause before saying something unnecessary, in the way someone stays even when they're no longer being tested. Angela didn't know what came next, but she didn't need to. She had a child growing inside her. She had her name on the restaurant window. She had her knives sharpened, her hands steady, and her mind clear. Whatever came, she was ready. And Aaron? He knew he wasn't owed anything, but he was willing to earn her trust the same way she had earned his respect, day by day, plate by plate, moment by moment. So now I'm asking you, do you think people can truly change? Have you ever watched someone turn from who they were into who they were trying to be, without asking for applause? Have you ever been hurt by someone, and then surprised by their growth? Or are there lines that can never be uncrossed? We want to hear your truth. Drop a comment below with a simple answer, yes or no. But if you're willing, share the reason why. Your story might help someone else find clarity in theirs. Like this video if you believe second chances are earned, not begged for. Share it if it reminded you of your own silent battles. And don't forget to subscribe for more emotionally grounded stories where strength doesn't always shout and love grows where it's least expected, because sometimes the quietest kitchens hold the loudest lessons. The contractions started around 3:17 a.m. Angela had barely slept. Her body felt like it had been waiting for this moment, not with anxiety but with quiet readiness. She sat up slowly in bed, one hand cradling her belly, the other reaching for her phone. The first wave of pain wasn't sharp. It was pressure, deep, rhythmic, like something was shifting from inside out. She breathed through it, eyes closed. 5 minutes later, another, then another. She didn't scream, didn't panic. She called her doctor, gave the necessary details, and nodded through the instructions. Then, after hanging up, she dialed one more number. Aaron picked up on the second ring. He didn't sound groggy, just alert. "Are you okay?" he asked. "It's time." He was at her apartment in less than 20 minutes. No questions, no delays. He didn't walk in loud or rushed. He just stepped inside, grabbed her hospital bag from beside the door, and helped her into her coat. Angela didn't need him to carry her. She was still walking on her own, still breathing through each contraction like a pro. But when her hand clenched the door frame during one long pulse of pain, he stood behind her and whispered, "I'm here." She didn't answer, but she didn't push him away. At the hospital, the nurses asked who would be joining her in the delivery room. Angela paused, just for a second, then nodded toward Aaron. "He's staying." The nurse raised an eyebrow. "Partner?" Angela met her eyes and said calmly, "Yes." Inside the room, Aaron moved quietly. He didn't hover. He didn't crowd. He helped her breathe, held her water, rested his hand on her lower back when she leaned against the bed during the stronger waves. He asked the nurses questions with the right balance of concern and calm. He didn't flinch when they explained what would come next. Angela noticed that. She noticed everything. Every way he didn't run. Every way he chose presence over panic. She was used to doing things alone. But as the hours passed, she let herself lean on him, just a little. When her legs shook, he steadied her. When her breathing fell out of rhythm, he helped her catch it again. When the doctor checked her progress and said, "We're getting close," Aaron didn't pace the floor. He just grabbed her hand, kissed her knuckles, and said, "We've got this." Angela didn't cry, but something inside her softened again, because he didn't have to be here. And yet, he was, fully, without needing to be asked. The next few hours blurred into a rhythm of pain and pressure. Angela sat on the edge of the hospital bed, her head tilted back, sweat gathering at her hairline. The contractions weren't waves anymore. They were full-body demands. No warning, no mercy, just deep, rolling force, one after the other. She gripped the side rail until her knuckles ached. Aaron stood beside her, his hand firmly wrapped around hers. He hadn't moved in over an hour. Not to sit, not to rest, not even to grab coffee when the nurse offered. He wasn't leaving, not even for a moment. Angela's breathing grew louder. Short bursts, controlled at first, then not. Her head dropped forward with a groan. Her back arched. Her legs trembled. Aaron leaned in. "Breathe through it. With me." She did, barely, but his voice was steady, deep, slow. He matched her breath for breath, reminding her of the rhythm she taught herself to trust. Another contraction hit hard. She cried out this time, sharp, quick, then muffled into her sleeve. Aaron dropped to his knees beside the bed, one hand on her thigh, the other gripping her hand again. "I've got you," he whispered, forehead pressed lightly to her arm. "You're not alone." She didn't speak, couldn't, but she felt the difference. She wasn't being handled. She was being held. The nurses checked her again. 9 centimeters. Almost there. Angela nodded weakly. Aaron moved behind her now, helping her shift positions, wrapping both arms around her from behind. She leaned back against his chest, and he anchored her, letting her body rest into his. "You're doing better than anyone I've ever seen," he whispered into her ear. "You've seen a lot of births, huh?" She muttered, voice hoarse but biting. He smiled into her shoulder. "Only this one matters." She squeezed his forearm tight when another contraction hit. It stole her breath, bent her forward, but Aaron didn't flinch. He stayed with her, arm locked tight, cheek resting near hers. Every time her strength started to shake, his voice pulled her back. "Just one more. You're almost there. I'm right here." She didn't expect to need him like this. But in that moment, she was grateful. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't pacing or crying or checking the time. He was grounded. And that steadiness gave her room to scream when the pain became unbearable, to cry when her body pushed harder than she thought it could, to break just a little without falling apart. When the doctor said, "It's time," and the nurses flooded the room, Aaron didn't let go. He moved beside her, hand in hers, eyes locked on hers. "You're ready," he said. Angela took a breath that felt like it came from her soul. And then she pushed. The delivery room fell into a tense silence. Only the beeping monitors and murmuring nurses filled the air. Angela's breaths were ragged now. Her face was flushed, damp with sweat, and her arms shook from holding herself upright. Aaron stood at her side, both hands gripping hers. His jaw clenched tight every time she cried out, but he didn't look away. Not once. "You're almost there," the doctor encouraged. One more big push. Angela didn't speak. She didn't nod. She just bared down, teeth clenched, scream caught in her throat as she gave everything her body had left. Aaron held his breath. Then, a sharp cry broke the room, raw, loud, new. Angela collapsed back against the pillows, eyes wide, mouth open, gasping for air, not from pain anymore, but from the weight of what had just happened. Aaron blinked, chest heaving, like he'd just come up for air after diving too deep. The nurse lifted the baby high for just a second. "It's a girl." Angela didn't cry immediately. She was still trying to process the sound, the tiny, powerful voice now piercing the room with urgency and need. The nurse gently placed the baby on her chest. Angela looked down. A soft pink face, eyes squeezed shut, mouth open wide, arms flailing. Tiny fingers, a head full of soft black curls. Her daughter, real, alive, ear. Angela cupped the baby's back with both hands, holding her close. The little body rested against her skin like it had always belonged there. Aaron leaned in slowly, eyes fixed on the child in Angela's arms. "She's perfect," he whispered. Angela didn't answer. Her lips trembled. She was still too stunned to speak. Not stunned from fear, stunned from love. The nurse handed over a warm blanket. Angela wrapped her daughter carefully, still staring, still holding, like if she blinked, the moment would shift. Aaron's hand brushed the baby's foot. It jerked in response. He smiled. Angela looked up at him finally, eyes red, voice low. "She's here," he nodded. "Yeah, she is." The nurse leaned in. "Do we have a name?" Angela didn't hesitate. "Trina." Aaron repeated it under his breath, like he was learning it for the first time. "Trina." He reached out gently, one hand resting against Angela's arm, the other cradling Trina's small head. The crying slowed. The baby's face relaxed. Angela let her head fall against Aaron's shoulder, eyes finally closing, one tear sliding down her cheek. It wasn't from pain. It was from peace, for all the uncertainty. For every moment she wondered if she'd have to face this alone. This moment proved otherwise. She was here. He was here. And Trina? She was perfect. The room was still. Muted sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting soft shadows on the hospital walls. Machines beeped quietly in the background. Nurses came and went with light steps, but Angela didn't hear them anymore. Her body was sore, her eyelids heavy, but her mind was awake, watching. Aaron sat in the corner, shirtless now, his skin against Trina's tiny body. She lay across his chest, wrapped in a soft hospital blanket. Her little ear pressed flat against his heart, her fists curled under her chin. Angela had never seen him like this. Aaron Curry, the untouchable chef, the man known for heat, fire, knives, and discipline, the man whose opinions sliced as sharp as his blades, the same man who once said he didn't date black women, now sitting in a quiet hospital room, shirt off, cradling their biracial daughter like she was made of gold. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't posturing. He looked down at the baby like he couldn't believe she was real, like he didn't deserve her, like holding her might teach him how to be softer. Angela shifted in the bed. The movement caught his attention. Their eyes met. She didn't say a word. Neither did he. But his expression said everything. Respect, awe, regret, love. He glanced back down at Trina, now sleeping against him, then turned slowly toward Angela. She calmed the moment they laid her on me, he said quietly. Stopped crying. Angela nodded, a faint smile forming. She knows your heartbeat. Aaron's throat moved, like he had something to say but wasn't sure how to say it. He stood and walked slowly toward the bed, still cradling Trina against his chest. Angela sat up a little, adjusting her pillows. He lowered himself into the chair beside her and leaned in, allowing Angela to touch their daughter's back with 2 fingers. She's got your nose, he whispered. Angela chuckled, still barely above a whisper. Poor girl. She's got your eyes too. I think. He paused. And your stubbornness. Angela smiled again, this time with more warmth. Then she'll be just fine. They sat in silence for a moment, both looking down at the small, sleeping miracle between them. Aaron broke it. I've never felt this before, he said. Not with food, not with awards, not with anything. Angela's eyes shifted toward him. You scared? Terrified. Good. He looked up, confused. Means you care, she added. Means you're taking it seriously. He nodded slowly. Angela leaned her head to the side, studying him. The curve of his arm, the way he held Trina, the stillness in his eyes. You look like a dad. Aaron turned his head. And you look like home. Angela didn't respond, but her hand moved toward his, rested on it, and stayed. The room had quieted again. Trina lay asleep in her bassinet now, her tiny chest rising and falling with steady peace. Angela rested with her eyes closed, but she wasn't asleep. She could feel the presence of someone watching her, not in a way that startled, but in a way that made her feel seen. Aaron sat beside her hospital bed, one hand lightly resting on her blanket-covered foot. He hadn't moved much since they returned from delivery. He barely touched his phone, barely looked away from her or Trina. Angela opened her eyes slowly. You're still here, she said, voice dry. I told you I wasn't leaving, he replied, calm but certain. She shifted, adjusting her sore back against the pillow. Most men leave eventually. Aaron didn't flinch. I would've, he said. The man I used to be. He would have found a way to ruin this, walk away, make it about ego. She looked at him sharply. And now? His eyes met hers, clear, soft, unblinking. Now, I'm finally who I want to be. Angela's breath caught for a second. Not because of the words, but because of the weight behind them. He didn't say it for effect. He said it like a man who had been fighting a version of himself for years. She studied him quietly. No walls, no performance, no arrogance. You know, she said, words like that don't fix the past. I don't expect them to. Angela looked down at her hands. Her nails were chipped. Her skin was dry. She didn't feel like the radiant chef the public always saw. Right now, she was raw, tender, new. I didn't carry her to impress you, she said plainly. I know, and I'm not some prize you get for changing. I don't want a prize, Aaron said. I want to show up for her, for you, For this, Angela blinked. She could feel a knot in her throat, the kind that comes when you want to believe someone but history fights you. Aaron shifted closer. I spent too long performing for rooms that didn't love me back. I built walls and burned bridges just to feel powerful, and I judged people I didn't even try to understand. Angela's eyes softened. She didn't say it, but she remembered. Every word, every look, every brush off. He took a slow breath. But when I saw you tonight, holding her, something cracked in me, and instead of fighting it, I let it break. Angela stayed quiet. Aaron reached out and touched her wrist gently. I know I can't undo how I started, but I'll control how I continue. Angela's voice came out low. She deserves more than words. She'll get more than words. They sat there, both leaning toward something fragile and real. Something that wasn't built on desire or apology, but on shared responsibility and new identity. Angela didn't say, I forgive you. She didn't have to. She didn't pull her wrist away either. And that was enough for now. The clock ticked gently. Trina's soft baby breaths filled the silence, steady like a lullaby. The lights were dimmed. The nurses had finished their rounds. The hospital room had turned still, suspended in a kind of peace that felt earned, not gifted. Angela lay back against the pillows, watching Aaron without words. He hadn't moved from her side. He hadn't reached for his phone. He hadn't looked at her like a burden. She watched him instead, his broad shoulders hunched slightly as he stared at the baby in the clear bassinet. His hand rested on the plastic edge, one finger tracing invisible circles, lost in a quiet thought. Angela's chest tightened, not from pain, but from something deeper. This was not the man she first met, not the one who dismissed her resume without reading it, not the one who said he didn't date black women, called it preference. This man had been stripped, unmasked, rebuilt, and even now, he didn't demand affection. He didn't reach for her. He simply stayed, present, humbled. She swung her legs gently over the side of the bed. He turned as he heard the sheets rustle but didn't speak. She stood slowly, the ache of delivery still fresh in her body, and walked over to where he sat. He looked up at her, his face unreadable, waiting. Angela sat beside him, her hospital gown loose over her frame, her skin still warm from the hours of labor. She didn't speak. She looked at him, face to face, eye to eye. And then she kissed him. No build-up, no hesitation, no speeches. Just her lips pressing into his, fully. Her hand cupped his jaw. Her thumb grazed the corner of his mouth. Her kiss didn't ask questions. It gave answers. He froze for a moment, then kissed her back. Slow, grounded, honest. There was no hunger this time, no heat, just reverence. She pulled back slightly, resting her forehead against his. You didn't earn me, she said softly. But you showed up. I'll keep showing up, he replied, breathless. She didn't promise him a future. She didn't speak of love. She didn't even say thank you. Instead, she placed her hand on his chest and listened to his heartbeat. Steady, real, present. For the first time in years, Angela didn't feel like she had to protect herself in a room with a man. She didn't feel like a woman who had to prove her worth, or guard her heart, or carry the whole weight of the moment alone. She felt partnered, seen, safe. She turned to look at Trina sleeping soundly, tiny fists balled under her chin, completely unaware of how much history she'd changed just by being born. Aaron followed her gaze. Angela whispered, "She's watching." He nodded. Then let her watch us do it right. They didn't kiss again that night. They didn't need to. The kiss had said everything. Aaron stood at the top of his penthouse balcony, the city lights stretching like a sea beneath him. But his eyes weren't on the skyline. They were on the folded papers in his hand, the finalized sales agreements. 2 of his flagship restaurants, gone, by choice. He had built his reputation in those kitchens. They made him rich, respected, envied. But now, they didn't matter. He didn't want applause. He wanted time. Time to be something he had never been before, present. His assistant called, reminding him about a lucrative deal with a food network. They wanted a series, a brand partnership, and a book deal. He declined them all in one breath. "I'm not available," he said. Indefinitely. The media spun stories about him retreating. Headlines speculated burnout, illness, a fall from fame. But Aaron never responded. He didn't need to explain. He was home every day now, not just physically, but emotionally. He cooked, but not for critics, just for Angela, for Trina, for peace. He restructured his calendar to align with his daughter's sleeping schedule, declined every speaking gig that fell during her nap time. He learned how to swaddle, how to warm milk just right, how to stay awake through a 2 a.m. diaper change without cursing the heavens. His staff, old and new, noticed the change. He laughed more, smiled easier. His shoulders had lowered, as if some invisible burden had slipped off. Angela watched quietly. She didn't say much, but she noticed. The Aaron who once claimed to prefer a version of love that excluded her had reshaped his entire life around the family they built together. He didn't announce his change. He lived it. And every time he passed a mirror, he barely recognized the man who once thought his standards were preferences instead of prejudice. That man had been loud, cocky, detached. This new version was quiet and intentional. Aaron Curry wasn't rebuilding a career. He was rebuilding himself. And for the first time, he was doing it from scratch. The first time Aaron gave Trina a bath, his hands shook. Not because he was scared of her, though she was impossibly small, but because he had never done anything like this before. He'd led kitchens that served kings and presidents. He'd orchestrated billion-dollar food empires. But a tiny tub, lukewarm water, and one slippery baby girl, that was the hardest job of his life. Angela stood nearby, pretending not to watch, but she was watching. Closely. Aaron gently cupped water over Trina's curls, careful not to let it get in her eyes. She kicked her feet, cooed, and then sneezed hard enough to soak his shirt. He laughed so loudly that Trina smiled like she'd planned it all. After her bath, he wrapped her in a warm towel and held her to his chest. She snuggled close, her heartbeat pressed to his. This was his new rhythm. Feedings at dawn, diaper changes on demand, rocking her to sleep with lullabies sung off-key. Sometimes he hummed classic jazz, other times he made up nonsense melodies. But Trina always listened, blinking up at him like his voice was her favorite sound. Aaron didn't miss the parties, the spotlight, or the adrenaline of fast-paced kitchens. He didn't long for reviews or interviews. He only needed these quiet hours where his worth wasn't tied to headlines or stars, but to the way his daughter's fingers curled around his thumb. He started waking up before her cries, almost instinctively. He learned the different meanings in her sounds, the one for hunger, for gas, for attention. He kept her baby bottles in a cooler next to the bed. Angela teased him about it, but her eyes softened every time she saw him burp. Their daughter, gently patting her back like she was made of porcelain. Some nights when Trina refused to sleep, he walked around the living room, bouncing her in his arms. The city skyline glowed through the window, but Aaron's world had narrowed to this one room, this one child. One night, Trina finally fell asleep against his chest. He looked down at her peaceful face and whispered, "You have no idea how much you've saved me." Angela stood at the doorway, watching him from the shadows. He didn't see her, but she smiled, knowing she'd made the right choice, giving him this chance to show up. Not for her, but for Trina. And he did. Every single day. Motherhood didn't slow Angela down. If anything, it sharpened her focus. By the time Trina turned 4 months old, Angela had already opened her second restaurant, Savor and Soul, on the south side of Chicago. It was more than a culinary spot. It was a community haven. She offered internships to young chefs of color, hosted workshops for teen girls, and reserved Sundays for family-style dinners where no one was turned away for lack of funds. The media called her a rising mogul with a baby on her hip. Angela didn't care much for titles. What mattered to her was being present, for her staff, her guests, her daughter. She built spaces that respected culture and pushed excellence. And she did it with clarity. Her business model was bold. She combined Southern roots with global flavors, but behind the food was a system, tight, organized, and smart. Angela reviewed spreadsheets while breastfeeding, negotiated vendor contracts while bouncing Trina in her carrier. She had no time for inefficiency and even less for pity. She was not the girl who walked away from curry and flame 2 years ago, heart bruised. She was the woman who now ran her own culinary empire. But she wasn't all steel. At night, she came home and dropped her heels by the door. She sank into the couch, hair loose, eyes soft. She let Aaron bring her a cup of ginger tea, let him rub her feet while Trina napped on his chest. She let herself be taken care of, but only because she knew she could walk away at any time. And Aaron understood that. He never hovered, never tried to tame her flame. He simply made room for it to burn brighter. He handled bath time and daycare drop-offs while Angela sat on advisory panels and spoke at leadership events. He cooked for her when she forgot to eat. On Sundays, he prepped the family's weekly meal so she could breathe. His support wasn't performative. It was steady. One afternoon, a reporter asked her how she balanced it all. Angela had paused, smiled lightly, and replied, "I don't balance, I prioritize." She didn't give credit where it wasn't earned, but in private, she acknowledged Aaron's growth. She saw the difference between the man who once dismissed her and the man who now stood beside her, silent but strong. Angela was powerful, not in spite of becoming a mother, but because of how she embraced it on her terms. Her name wasn't just respected, it was etched into Chicago's culinary future. And through it all, she never lost sight of who she was. Their love wasn't loud. It didn't need big declarations or fiery arguments. What Angela and Aaron shared now was something quieter, steadier, earned. They didn't fill space with empty words. They filled it with action. Every morning, Aaron would brush Trina's curls while Angela brewed her strong black coffee. They moved around each other in their apartment kitchen like a practiced dance, her grabbing the lunch containers, him packing the baby bag. No one led, no one followed. They simply moved together. Angela found peace in that rhythm. The absence of chaos was unfamiliar, but welcome. She'd had relationships before, men who tried to control her shine, others who praised her independence but disappeared when life got real. Aaron did neither. He stayed when Trina had colic and screamed through the night. He stayed when Angela had a speaking engagement across town and needed to pump breast milk between panels. He didn't complain. He just made space. Gently. Quietly. Their intimacy had changed, too. It wasn't rushed or desperate. It was tender, built on looks that lingered too long and hands that found each other during the most ordinary moments. When they made love now, it wasn't to prove something. It was to connect. To remind each other that even in the demands of life, they still saw each other. One night, while folding laundry on the bed, Angela paused. "I never thought love could feel like this," she said. Aaron looked up from Trina's tiny onesies, setting them down carefully. "Like what?" "Like rest," she whispered. He didn't say anything. He just leaned over and kissed her forehead. She let her head fall against his shoulder. It was those moments, unremarkable to outsiders, that built the foundation of their bond. It wasn't dramatic, but it was deep. It wasn't perfect, but it was safe. They had disagreements, sure, sometimes over business schedules or missed appointments, but their arguments were different now. No yelling, no walking out, just pauses, listening, real talk. Aaron no longer reacted from pride. He responded from love. And Angela no longer fought to be seen. She knew she was. Their home was simple but full, of color, music, the scent of lemon balm and roasted garlic, and the sounds of Trina's babbles echoing through the hallways. Angela often worked late into the night at her desk. Aaron would come behind her, rub her shoulders and say, "Come to bed." Rest can be productive too. Sometimes she'd follow. Other times he'd sit beside her in silence, supporting her without needing to speak. That was them now, no longer two people healing separately, but one unit building forward. A love that grew quietly, but never softly. It was late, the kind of night when even the city lights seemed to dim out of respect for silence. Angela had just finished nursing Trina and placed her back in the bassinet. Aaron was sitting on the couch, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped. His face was unreadable, eyes locked on the floor like he was staring through it. Angela walked over with a glass of water and sat beside him. He didn't take it. She knew that posture. She'd seen it before, on men who were about to run. But Aaron wasn't running. He was trying to face something. "I hated myself for a long time," he said quietly. Angela didn't move. "I know," she said. Aaron turned slightly, surprised by her calm tone. "You do?" "I knew it the moment you said those words at Curry and Flame," she answered. "People who feel whole don't spit brokenness like that." Aaron sighed. He rubbed the back of his neck and leaned back against the couch, looking up at the ceiling like he was searching for courage. "I grew up with a father who saw the world in categories: value, image, race, money. He made it clear what was acceptable, what wasn't, what was allowed into our world, and what was better left outside it." Angela stayed quiet. Aaron continued. "Every part of me that didn't match that image, I buried, until I stopped knowing what I even liked, who I even was. His voice cracked slightly, but he didn't stop. "When I saw you that day, strong, black, brilliant, it scared me, not because of you, but because it woke something up in me I'd been taught to silence." Angela's eyes didn't blink. She wanted to reach for his hand, but waited. "I didn't hate you," he said. "I hated how much I saw you, how much I wanted to learn from you, how deeply you threatened everything I was pretending to believe." Angela leaned back, arms crossed. She watched him quietly. He finally looked at her. "I was a coward." She nodded once. "Yes, you were." Aaron let out a slow breath, like he had been holding that truth in his chest for years. "I'm not asking you to forgive the man I was," he said. "I'm only hoping to become someone that deserves the life I now have." Angela turned fully toward him. "Then keep becoming," she said, "because the man I kissed in that hospital wasn't perfect. But he was finally real." He let that settle between them. And for the first time, he didn't feel ashamed. He felt free. The room was warm, filled with the quiet hum of the baby monitor and the scent of rosemary from Angela's tea. Trina was asleep. The lights were low. Aaron sat cross-legged on the rug while Angela leaned against the couch, her robe wrapped tightly around her waist, still damp from her evening bath. They hadn't spoken in a while, not because of discomfort, but because some truths required silence to rise. Aaron finally broke it. "I wish I'd met you later," he said, his voice low. Angela looked over. "Why?" "So I could have been worthy right away." Angela stared at him. Her eyes didn't soften. They sharpened. "No," she said flatly. He blinked. "No. If you met me later, you wouldn't have learned anything," she replied. "Growth is earned, not timed." Aaron dropped his eyes. Angela set her mug on the floor and leaned toward him. "You didn't love yourself, Aaron," she said. "You feared what I reflected." His eyebrows pulled together. "I don't understand." "Yes, you do," she said. "You saw strength in me you weren't ready to face in yourself. You saw blackness that wasn't submissive, wasn't waiting to be tolerated. You saw a woman who didn't need your approval." He exhaled, slow and painful. "You mistook your discomfort as disgust," she added. "But it wasn't me. It was your own shame." Aaron's throat tightened. He wanted to defend himself, but she wasn't attacking him. She was naming the truth. "And I didn't try to fix you," she said. "That's not love. That's ego. You had to fix yourself." Aaron nodded. "You did," she added. "And that's the only reason we're here right now. That little girl in the next room doesn't have a coward for a father." His eyes watered, and he quickly wiped at them with the back of his hand. Angela didn't reach out. She let him sit in it. Then she said softly, "I never needed you to become someone new. I needed you to become honest." He looked up at her, really looked. "And now?" he asked. Angela tilted her head. "Now?" she repeated. "Now I trust you enough to tell you what I see." He waited. "I see a man who unlearned hate without demanding applause. I see a father who shows up. I see a partner who listens, sometimes too much, but still listens." A smile ghosted his lips. Angela leaned in closer. "And I see someone who knows love isn't a prize. It's proof." He swallowed. "I never thought I'd be this man," he whispered. Angela's voice was calm. "Neither did I." Then she touched his face and added, "But I'm proud that you are." Aaron didn't speak at first. Her words settled into him like roots pressing deep into the ground, uncomfortable, anchoring, necessary. Angela leaned back slightly, not out of retreat, but to give him space to process. She wasn't the type to press for gratitude. She never needed to be thanked for seeing someone's truth. But Aaron wanted to give it anyway, because this wasn't about ego. It was about acknowledgement. "You're right," he said finally, voice husky from holding back emotion. "I feared you." Angela's brows lifted slightly. "I feared the way you moved through rooms like you belonged there," he went on. "I feared your calm, your fire. I didn't grow up with that kind of strength around me, especially not from a black woman." She stayed silent, letting him continue. "I was raised around people who smiled in the face of things they didn't understand. They'd nod, pretend to accept, but behind closed doors, the jokes came out. The lines were drawn. It seeped into me before I knew how to fight it." Aaron looked down at his hands. "By the time I realized I'd been fed lies, I was too proud to admit it. So I built a career on control, in the kitchen, in my image, in who I let in." Angela nodded slowly, allowing the silence to stretch before speaking. "And now?" she asked. He looked at her. "Now I know that control isn't strength, it's fear in a tuxedo." She smiled. Small, but it reached her eyes. Aaron shifted closer. "Angela, I know you don't need my gratitude, but I'm going to say it anyway." He reached for her hand. She let him take it. "Thank you," he said, "for showing up with more grace than I deserved, for not shrinking when I made you feel invisible, for raising our daughter in a world that still looks for excuses not to see her." Her throat moved, emotion rising. "And for not letting me off the hook," he added. "Not once." Angela blinked. A single tear escaped before she wiped it away with the back of her hand. Quick, no drama. "You've grown," she said. "But I didn't do that. You did. I just didn't protect you from the discomfort." Aaron nodded. "And that was love, wasn't it?" Angela's voice was firm. "That was respect." They stayed quiet for a moment, fingers interlaced. Not lovers in that moment, not even co-parents, just two people who had stopped running from themselves and each other. Aaron brought her hand to his lips. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving I deserved that." Angela pulled him close, not to comfort, but to remind him he already was. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the white noise machine and the slow, even breaths of a baby wrapped snug between two warm bodies. The nursery light dimmed to a soft golden glow, just enough to see Trina's tiny chest rise and fall. Angela lay on her side, one hand resting gently on her daughter's belly. Her eyes were tired, but peaceful. Her curls fell loose across the pillow. Across from her, Aaron mirrored the same pose, his fingers grazing Trina's tiny fist. They didn't speak at first. There was no need to. The silence between them wasn't filled with distance anymore. It was full of knowing. Trina stirred, her face scrunching as if caught in a dream. Aaron reached out and softly rubbed her back with two fingers, and the baby settled again. He let out a quiet breath, one of those unconscious releases that only come from men who used to carry the weight of being too much and not enough all at once. Angela watched him. She hadn't meant to fall in love like this, not with a man who once embodied everything she had taught herself to avoid. But love didn't come dressed in ease. It came disguised in mistakes, shaped by choices and tested through fire. Aaron turned to look at her. "You still scared?" Angela shook her head. "Not of this." He reached across their daughter, brushing her fingers with his. "Of what then?" Angela paused. "Of ever forgetting what it took to get here." He nodded slowly. "We won't. This," he looked down at Trina, "this makes sure we don't." She smiled. A tired, full smile. Aaron shifted closer, resting his forehead gently against hers. "I don't need 5 restaurants, or camera crews, or food critics writing columns with stars in their eyes. I just need this, you, her." "You're soft now," she teased. "I'm whole now," he replied. Angela traced a slow circle on Trina's blanket. "She's going to grow up loved." "She already is," he said. And then as the room quieted again, Aaron whispered, "I used to think I was building a legacy with food, but this..." He looked at both of them. "This is the legacy I care about now." Angela leaned forward and kissed him, gentle and slow. Not for show, not for fireworks, just for presence. Then they both turned their attention back to the child between them, warm, asleep, unaware that she was the glue to a love rewritten from scratch. Angela sighed, content. Aaron's arms slid around both of them. No grand declarations, no need for more words. Just skin to skin, peaceful, proven, together. The kitchen was quiet again. Not the kind of quiet that stings, but the kind that fills a home with peace. On one end of the room, a high chair sat clean and waiting. On the counter, a bottle. Drying rack. On the fridge, a photo of Angela, Aaron, and Trina at the farmer's market, smiling like they'd always belonged to each other. Aaron leaned against the doorway, arms folded, watching the two women who changed everything about him. Angela was seated on the floor with Trina in her lap, reading the same picture book for the 3rd time that evening. Her voice was calm, her eyes soft, and Trina's curls bounced as she giggled and pointed at a drawing of a blueberry muffin. He didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. He had learned how to simply be there. Fully. Years ago, he spoke words that kept his world small. "I don't date black women. It's a preference." It wasn't a preference. It was fear. It was ignorance. It was a version of him built on arrogance and lies told in safe circles. But life has a way of pulling truth out of people. Angela didn't have to teach him with lectures. She taught him with her strength, her silence, her standards. She didn't beg for his growth. She demanded it by choosing herself. And that's what changed everything. Now, he was a father, a partner, a man with flour on his shirt and baby socks in his pocket, a man who traded ego for family, a man who didn't flinch when asked who he loved. He walked over and lifted Trina from Angela's lap, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "Time for bed, sweet girl." Angela rose, stretched, and leaned against the counter. "You still surprised it's us?" Aaron shook his head, holding their daughter. "I'm not surprised. I'm just grateful you let me stay." Angela stepped closer. "I didn't let you stay, Aaron. You showed up and stayed the right way. That's what made the difference." He smiled. She smiled back. In that moment, nothing from the past mattered more than the peace they'd earned. No tabloids, no comments, no whispers from bitter corners of the internet. Just them. One kitchen, one child, one decision at a time. If you watch this story to the end, let me say, thank you. Not every story starts right. Some begin with mistakes. Some start in silence. Others crash into our lives with words we wish we could take back. But what matters most is choice. Who we choose to become. Who we fight for. What we decide to build. Aaron started with the wrong words. Angela walked away with grace. But together, they created something worth holding on to. Now it's your turn. Comment below. I was wrong, but I chose better. If you believe people can grow and love can transform lives. Like this video, if the story moved you, share it with someone who needs this kind of healing and hope. Subscribe for more inspiring, real-life storytelling that stays with you. We don't chase perfection here. We tell stories that heal. This is Mr. Peterson Long Stories. See you in the next one.